I believe we're going to go live to the Senate floor now and see what's going on there. So, Joe, feel free to take us to the Senate floor. And thanks again so much, Craig, for hopping on with us.
All right. Thanks a lot, Evan. Looking forward to seeing what they have to say.
On this, the 1-year anniversary of President Trump's net neutrality repeal going into effect, we will call for an immediate vote on the Save the Internet Act. Unfortunately, our Republican colleagues are failing to listen to the voices of their constituents and plan to block the vote from happening. Let's be clear. Net neutrality is just another way in which the Republican Party refuses to side with the ordinary people in our country. Regular families, small businesses, startup software companies, how do they get access to the internet in a way in which they cannot feel that corporate pressure restricting their ability to use this incredible invention to further the democratization of access to opportunity, or at the same time to innovate in a way which continues to change not only our own country, but our own world. We can't let big companies discriminate against individual consumers. We can't let big companies stifle speech. Once you pay your monthly internet service bill, you can go anywhere you want on the internet without your provider slowing down or blocking your path to a website of your choosing. This is a fight. And it's a fight for innovation, for entrepreneurialism, for the American economy, a fight for free speech, the cornerstone of our democracy. A fight for the most powerful platform for commerce and communications in the history of the planet. The Save the Internet Act does exactly what the American people want. It restores the rules that ensure families aren't subject to higher prices, slower internet speeds, and even blocked websites because the big broadband providers want to pump up their profits. Under Senator McConnell's leadership, the Republicans are trying to bury this bill in a legislative graveyard. Instead of acting on legislation, which again passed the Senate a year ago, it just passed in the House in April of this year, Leader McConnell has been doing little but confirming unqualified extreme right nominees for the Trump administration. Just listen to the bills that the Senate Republicans refuse to act on. The Violence Against Women Act, no votes out here on the Senate floor. Voting and Democracy Reform, no votes out here on the Senate floor. Gun and background checks, passed the House, no vote here in the Senate. Paycheck fairness, the Paris Climate Agreement, no, no, no. But the Senate Majority Leader and his Republican colleagues can keep populating the legislative graveyard at their political peril. Because this is the agenda which the American people want to see the Senate debating, and they want to see these laws put on the books to protect families in our country. And that's because the issues they are blocking are enormously popular, most with strong bipartisan support. Take net neutrality. 86% of Americans do not approve of the Federal Communications Commission action to repeal net neutrality rules, including 82% of Republicans. But we're not going to have a vote out here on the Senate floor. On background checks for gun purchases, 97% of Americans support requiring background checks for all gun buyers. But we're not going to have a vote out here on the Senate floor. And on staying in the Paris Climate Agreement, nearly 70% of registered voters believe that the United States should keep its promise and stay in that historic agreement to combat climate change. But the Republicans will not allow us to even have a vote on that out here on the Senate floor. The only place where these issues don't have Republican support is in Senator McConnell's office. Across the country, huge bipartisan numbers on each and every one of those issues. It's time we do right by the American people. And we can start with the Save the Internet Act and protect the Internet as we know it. More than 100 outside advocacy organizations wrote to Senate leadership today urging a vote on the net neutrality legislation. They want action now, and Democrats are committed to fighting on their behalf. I am joined today by some of our greatest fighters for net neutrality here in the Senate and across our country. The ranking member of the Commerce Committee, Maria Cantwell from Washington State, will be out here in a few minutes. But now I'm joined by Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Senator Wyden and I introduced net neutrality legislation 15 years ago in the House and in the Senate. And nobody understands this issue better than Senator Wyden does. And partnering with Senator Cantwell, we are going to continue this battle. And whether it's on the floor of the Senate, in the House, whether it's in the courts, we will not stop fighting until net neutrality is restored. So from my perspective, right from the very beginning, Senator Wyden and I have been on the right side of history. We've been fighting for an issue which has overwhelming public support, and we're not going to give up until we have won this fight. So at this point, I would like, Mr. President, to yield back the balance of my time.
The Senator from Oregon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm pleased to be able to join my friend, Senator Markey, here today. It's been exactly 1 year since the Trump FCC engineered the repeal of net neutrality, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes making sure people understand what the effect of that has been. And I want to begin by picking up on a point Senator Markey made with respect to what this is all about. Net neutrality may still be a term that some people aren't familiar with, but what it's all about is a free and open internet. And it means, in simple English, after you pay your internet access fee, you get to go where you want, when you want, and how you want. That is what net neutrality is all about, and that is the essence of a free and open internet. And as Senator Markey said, we wish we had had this policy embedded once and for all in federal law. We wish it had happened eons ago, because we have been working both in the Senate and House to do it. Now, if you're just picking up on this, you probably want to know, well, these senators are saying the Trump FCC changed things in the last year. Exactly what's happened? I'm not sure the sky's fallen and the like. So what I'm going to do for a few minutes is talk about actually what has happened over the last year. And suffice it to say, the big cable companies are counting on making these changes which are going to hurt consumers in a steady, creeping way. And my sense is that the American people ought to know, for example, what these changes are doing to them and their service and what they pay for it. One example you're already seeing. The big carriers are selling so-called unlimited data plans that totally throw away the definition of the word unlimited. To understand the complicated limits on internet access in these kind of newfangled unlimited plans, you almost need a degree in big cable legal jargon. Consumers might be forced to swallow hard and accept it. That doesn't make it acceptable. Big cable companies and the entertainment giants are also reshaping their industries through mega mergers. As the big carriers merge, there's less competition. Consumers have fewer choices. Some of those new mega corporations also own the content they distribute, and they want it to reach as many consumers as possible. That means what's happening now is the internet is starting to fracture. Sign up for internet service with one company, and you'll be able to see their preferred bundle of content in high definition at top speeds. Want to go outside their bundle of websites and streaming services? Plan to pay a whole lot more, and that is a bad deal for the American consumer. American consumers ought to be able to access what they want when they want to. And it is also, as Senator Markey and I and Senator Cantwell have talked about, it is also a nightmare for the startup companies, the engines of innovation in America, who won't be able to afford special treatment and won't be able to compete with these behemoths. Now, the Trump FCC repealed net neutrality, and I'll close with this, by making some very far-fetched promises. And they said, for example, there would be new innovation. They could produce new innovation, Senator Markey, without any regulation. That hadn't happened. The Trump FCC said the level of private investment in telecom would boom. We're still waiting on that one, too. The Trump FCC spun a tale about voluntary net neutrality. We could all do this just voluntarily, claiming that the big cable companies would do the right thing on their own. That one doesn't even pass the smell test. If the companies really were just fine with net neutrality, by the way, colleagues, why would we need to get rid of it? They sure put a lot of effort into getting rid of this altogether. The bottom line is the Trump FCC has put consumers from sea to shining sea, from Oregon all the way across the country, basically at the hands of big cable. That's what they did when they repealed net neutrality. And I wanted to take some time to outline the changes we've seen in just the last year, because not all of these changes are going to come at once. In fact, I think it's fair to say the big cable companies are counting on Americans not noticing sometimes when the terms of their contracts get worse. But bit by bit, people are going to notice when their prices start rising. The fractures in the internet. I guess the big cable companies will try to figure out a way to say that, too, is a good deal for consumers. A discount on the content within one bundle rather than a price increase and data limits on everything else. But I'll close with just one final point. That last example violates everything that Senator Markey, Senator Cantwell, and I have stood for, which is an open and free internet. After you pay your internet access fee, and I say this today as Senator Cantwell gets ready to close this for us, we still envision, as Senator Markey and I proposed, as I call it, eons ago, we still have made it clear we are going to be out here fighting to embed once and for all in federal law an open and free internet. That means after you pay your internet access fee, you get to go where you want, when you want, and how you want, and nothing less keeps faith with the American consumer. I thank my colleague, Senator Markey, for his leadership in this, Senator Cantwell, our leader on the Commerce Committee, and I look forward to working with both of them.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I come to the floor this morning to join my colleagues, the senator from Oregon, who has been a long proponent of a very strong internet economy and privacy rights as a senator, and I very much appreciate his leadership on so many of these technology issues. He and I represent a very strong technology economy in the Pacific Northwest, and we want to fight to keep that innovation. He and I actually held a summit in our joining communities just about the app economy. This was several years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago now. He and I worked together to formulate with our colleges, Washington State University and Oregon, literally just the app economy. I think about that, the applications we saw 7 years ago. Some of them were for hiking trails. Some of them were for solutions for our law enforcement to have better information. Some of them were just pure business applications. But I think about how much we have grown that app economy in the last 10 years, 7 to 10 years, but how much it would be impacted by an internet that is not an open internet and universal to giving people access to service. I say this because those new startups know more than anybody else, that if they're not the big behemoth in the market and they're competing against they're a new entrant competing against an existing business, or they have a new idea, if they don't have the clout to have fast internet speed, then they're not going to reach consumers. They're not going to reach their clients. They're not going to have a business model that is successful. So I thank Senator Wyden for his leadership for decades on these important issues, and I thank my colleague Senator Markey for organizing us this morning to say one thing loud and clear. After 1 year, we already know what's happening to the internet, and one thing the United States Senate could do is have a vote to protect consumers from big cable companies overcharging them. That's why we're out here today, to say that we should have a vote to protect consumers. To protect the 15,000 internet companies that produce 20% of our economy and over 377,000 jobs in my state, I guarantee you I want to be here this morning to articulate why an internet service needs to be protected. We know that we have to fight back against companies who want to gouge consumers or suppress competition. And being 1 year since the FCC decided to turn back protections for the internet, we're here today because we know that we've already seen the inklings of what is more to come. Companies that are doing things that are slowing down or charging consumers more. And we know that more than 20 million people stood up and told the FCC they want strong internet protections. They do not want to see large-scale companies overcharging or gouging them. I don't even know how we talk about getting to broadband service if you are not going to have strong rules on the internet that protect consumers from being overcharged. The truth is that we know today that the internet is a great economy for us. It's helping us do research. It's helping in life-saving healthcare. We had one of the FCC commissioners out in the Pacific Northwest look at telemedicine applications, and they are phenomenal in helping us with everything from PTSD to looking at ways to help deliver just-in-time health care for those who are in the remote parts of our state. So we know that the internet is the great equalizer. It's helping people from different backgrounds participate in an economy, and it's helping with economic empowerment. But innovative businesses in every small town and every city need to have an internet that is going to give them access to create jobs and move their local economies forward. But today in the United States, just three cable companies have control of internet access for 70% of Americans. And 80% of rural Americans still only have one choice for high-speed broadband in their homes and businesses. So we're not going to get likely competition where the consumer can just say, you're artificially slowing me down, you're charging me too much, I'm just going to go to the competition. That's not likely to happen. So that is why we need a strong FCC approach to protecting an open internet and saying that they shouldn't block, they shouldn't throttle, they shouldn't manipulate internet access. And without these protections, big cable can move faster in charging more. So I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to say that it's time to hold these companies accountable and put consumers ahead of these big cable profits. Well, I guarantee you the American people know better. Literally, it doesn't matter what political affiliation you have, the majority of Americans all oppose repealing protections that make for an open internet. They know that it is time that we protect consumers and that this is only going to get more complex as our economy depends more and more on an open internet. But as my colleague from Oregon said, the Trump FCC has given a green light to these companies to basically keep doing whatever they want, to continue to basically have ideas that just take more out of the consumer's pocket. But today here on the Senate floor, we have an opportunity. My colleague from Massachusetts, who's been such a great leader on these issues and has been working to protect an open internet for decades, has an opportunity here to say where we stand in protecting the American consumer. Just last year, a bipartisan majority here in the United States Senate, 49 Democrats and 3 Republicans, joined together to overturn the FCC's repealing of internet protections. We were here together to say we want the internet protected. Now the House of Representatives has done its job. It has basically protected the internet and taken an initiative. It's time for Leader McConnell to put the big cable companies out here for debate on the Senate floor and hold them accountable so that we can say we want an open internet, and this type of practice should be fought against. So I hope our colleagues will be given this opportunity for this debate to look at why consumers are so important to protect, why the innovation economy is so important to protect, and why a free and open internet is so important to protect. I hope tomorrow, as we also have an FCC hearing before the Senate Commerce Committee, that we'll also be able to continue to ask these important questions about why cable companies are continuing to gouge consumers in important areas. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President, very much. Mr. President, I think that Senator Cantwell and Senator Wyden have done an excellent job in laying out the parameters of the problems that exist if we do not have net neutrality enshrined as the law of the land. We believe that the principles of non-discrimination, the principles that ensure that the internet is open, accessible for the smallest voices as well as the largest voices. But we need laws to protect the smallest voices. We need protections to ensure that they are going to be heard, that they can innovate, that they can take their entrepreneurial zeal, their insights into the additional changes that can be made in this long standing now 20-year history of the dynamic changes that have taken place in this online commercial world, and that they'll be able to innovate. You should not have to get permission to innovate. You should not have to get permission to be able to change the way in which people communicate in our country. You shouldn't have to hire lawyers to negotiate with the lawyers of the biggest companies in the United States in order to ensure that your investors aren't going to lose all their money as the small company gets tipped upside down and has all of their resources absolutely devastated by anti-competitive activity. So that's what this is all about: democracy and capitalism, entrepreneurial spirit, the ability to innovate, the ability to be able to go to the marketplace. But in order for capitalism to work, it has to have a conscience. Capitalism without a conscience is just unfettered large corporations taking advantage of small companies, startups, and individuals in our society. It's got to have a conscience. Net neutrality is the conscience for the online world that we live in. It ensures that there is fairness. It ensures that there is openness. It ensures that the apertures that are there cannot be narrowed just because of the corporate agenda of an individual huge company. So that's the essence of this whole debate. It's something that we believe is at the heart of what this 21st century platform for commerce should include, and it will be, in a lot of ways, the defining issue for whether or not this entire era is one that's characterized by fairness or one that's characterized by monopolistic or duopoly practices. So, Mr. President, I ask on behalf of Senator Cantwell and Senator Wyden and myself, I ask unanimous consent as if in legislative session the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 74, H.R. 1644, a bill to restore the open internet order of the Federal Communications Commission, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening actions or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
Senator from Mississippi.
I don't think the answer to the questions are going to be any surprise to my friend from Massachusetts. I will only say this, and I'll try to do it briefly. I've been amazed over the last year and a half, and even longer, at the intense, overblown rhetoric about this issue of net neutrality and about the hyperbole that we've heard on the floor of the Senate and elsewhere. About a year and a half ago, the FCC voted on the Restoring Internet and Freedom Order. It went into effect. It repealed what most of us considered a heavy-handed approach based on a law that took effect back in 1934. And when the FCC implemented this new Restoring Internet Freedom Order back a year and a half ago, I was just astounded by what was being said by my friends on the left. One senator warned that this was practically the end of Netflix, YouTube, and Amazon. Another caution, they want to get rid of the FCC's net neutrality rules so that internet service providers, I'm quoting directly, can indiscriminately charge more for internet fast lanes, slow down websites, block websites, make it harder and maybe even impossible for inventors and entrepreneurs. One tweet from our friends on the Democratic side said, quote, "If we don't save net neutrality, you'll get the internet one word at a time." That quote got 3 Pinocchios from even the Washington Post. These things never happen. As a matter of fact, people on the other side of the issue who actually have taken the senator from Massachusetts' position have admitted that ISPs are delivering on consumers' expectations. They're not throttling websites. And as a matter of fact, here is what has happened since the FCC order went into effect a year and a half ago. Broadband providers, large and small, have deployed fiber networks to 5.9 million new homes, the largest number ever recorded. More Americans are connected at higher speeds than ever before, and capital expenditures have rebounded from the slump they suffered when the internet was subjected to Title II. This should surprise no one because the internet has thrived during Democratic and Republican administrations, during Democrat majorities on the FCC and Republican majorities on the FCC, when we've taken the right touch regulatory approach. The issue seems to be Title II regulation of rates. And I would simply say to my brothers and sisters on the other side of the aisle, we can pass a law tomorrow afternoon providing Americans with all the protection they want, from blocking, throttling, and preventing paid prioritization. What we will not do, and what this president will not sign, is legislation authorizing the federal government to set internet rates in the old 1934 Bell system of Title II regulation. And so for that reason, Mr. President, I do object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, despite the Republican objections today, Senator Cantwell, Senator Wyden, and I, and tens of millions of people across this country will not stop fighting until net neutrality is fully restored, whether in the halls of Congress or in the courts of our country. That is going to be a fight that is fought until it is finally won. Mr. President, I yield back.